A wrongfully convicted cop begs to hug his daughter one last time. But what happens next? Would the truth set him free, or would the system bury him forever? The early morning sunlight filtered through the window blinds of the Hollywood household, casting soft golden lines across the wooden floor. The smell of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen, mixing with the faint scent of lavender from the candles Hannah loved to light before bed. Officer Peterson Hollywood sat at the breakfast table, watching his 4-year-old daughter, Lily, swing her little legs beneath her chair as she played with her cereal. She hummed to herself, blissfully unaware of the world's darkness, unaware that her father had spent the past 10 years keeping that darkness from their doorstep. "Are you ready for your checkup today, sweetheart?" Hannah asked, running a gentle hand through Lily's soft curls. Lily pouted. "I don't want to get shots." Peterson chuckled, reaching over to tap her tiny nose. "You're braver than me, kiddo. I hate needles." Lily giggled, her laughter like music. Hannah kissed Peterson's cheek as she grabbed her purse. "Victoria and I will take her. You should get some sleep before your night shift." He sighed, exhaustion creeping in. "Yeah, I probably should." But he knew he wouldn't. Instead, he'd stay up, waiting for Lily to come home, ready to hold her close and tell her how proud he was of her for being brave. Later that night, as Peterson expected, Lily couldn't sleep. She had tossed and turned, her tiny body restless under the soft pink comforter in her room. At around midnight, she appeared in their bedroom doorway, rubbing her tired eyes. "Daddy," she whispered. Peterson was already reaching for her. "Come here, sweetheart." She climbed into his arms, pressing her cheek against his shoulder. "I don't want to sleep alone." Hannah stirred but didn't wake. She had always been a deep sleeper. Peterson carried Lily downstairs, flicked on the History Channel, and settled onto the couch with her. The soft hum of a documentary about ancient Egypt played in the background, its narrator droning on about pyramids and forgotten kings. Lily's little fingers curled around the fabric of his t-shirt, her breathing slowing as he rocked her gently. This was their routine, their bond. He never imagined it would be used against him. In the dim glow of the television, Victoria stood at the top of the staircase, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She watched Peterson with narrowed eyes, something bitter and unreadable flickering behind them. Victoria had been living with them for nearly 6 months now, claiming she needed a fresh start after a breakup. She had always been close to Hannah, but with each passing day, she seemed more resentful, more withdrawn. It wasn't just that she disapproved of Peterson. She wanted Hannah back. And in her twisted mind, the only way to do that was to remove Peterson from the picture. The next morning, Hannah and Victoria took Lily to her doctor's appointment. Peterson, exhausted after working a night shift, stayed home. Inside the clinic, Victoria saw her chance. As the doctor examined Lily, Victoria leaned forward, her voice low but purposeful. "I don't want to cause trouble," she whispered, "but I think you should know. Peterson takes Lily downstairs at night. He sits with her in the dark for hours." The doctor's hands froze mid-examination. She lifted her eyes to Victoria's, her expression shifting from neutral concern to something far more serious. "Are you saying you suspect something inappropriate?" Victoria hesitated, just long enough to plant the seed of doubt. "I don't know," she said finally, "but I just think it's strange." That was all it took. Peterson was just stepping out of the shower when his phone rang. Unknown number. He frowned, rubbing a towel over his damp hair before answering. "Officer Hollywood." "This is he." The voice on the other end was calm, too calm. "This is Detective Marshall with the Westbridge Police Department. We need you to come down to the station immediately. There's been an allegation against you." Peterson's stomach dropped. What kind of allegation? There was a pause, then the detective's voice turned cold. "Child sexual abuse." Peterson felt his world crack open beneath him. No, that's a mistake. "Sir, I need you to comply. The faster we handle this, the better it will be for you." The words barely made sense. His vision blurred. Lily. Hannah. They needed him. But as Peterson stumbled to get dressed and grab his badge, he already knew this was just the beginning. By the time Peterson pulled into the police station, he saw them waiting. 2 officers, a CPS agent, and behind them, Victoria. She stood off to the side, arms crossed, face unreadable. Hannah was nowhere in sight. "Step out of the car, Officer Hollywood," one of the officers said. Peterson complied, his heartbeat roaring in his ears. "I don't understand. This has to be a mistake." The officer stepped forward, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. "Peterson Hollywood, you are under arrest for child sexual abuse." Cold metal snapped around his wrists. His badge, his career, his family, all of it was slipping away. And as he was shoved into the back of the squad car, his eyes locked with Victoria's. She didn't smile. But he knew. She had done this. The walls of the interrogation room felt too close, too suffocating. The air was thick, sterile, and laced with the faint scent of coffee and sweat. The metal table in front of Peterson Hollywood was cold beneath his fingertips, but nothing compared to the ice spreading through his chest. Detective Marshall sat across from him, his expression unreadable. Detective Grayson, a younger officer with a sharp jaw and skeptical eyes, leaned against the wall, arms crossed. They were watching him, waiting. Peterson could feel it. The silent accusation, the assumption of guilt. "Let's cut to the chase," Marshall finally said, flipping open a folder. "We already know what happened. We just need you to be honest." "I am being honest," Peterson said, his voice steady, but his hands clenched into fists beneath the table. "I did nothing wrong." Marshall sighed, shaking his head. "Peterson, you're a cop. You know how this works. Just admit what you did, and things will go easier for you." Anger flared in Peterson's chest. "I didn't do anything." Grayson scoffed. "So, what? The kid made it up. CPS got it wrong. The doctors. Your own sister-in-law." Peterson swallowed hard. Victoria. She was behind this. He knew it with every fiber of his being. And yet, they were believing her. "She's lying," he said, his voice sharp. "Or she misunderstood something. You have to believe me." Marshall's eyes remained cold. "Then explain this." He slid a transcript across the table. "CPS INTERVIW with Liloi Hooloi. Does your daddy give you baths?" "Yes." "Has he ever hurt you in the bath?" Pause. "Yes." "How?" Child wiggled her fingers. Peterson's stomach turned. That was it. That was all they had. They didn't ask her how I hurt her. If she had a rash? If she was uncomfortable? His voice cracked. "She's 4 years old. She doesn't understand what they're asking." "They didn't need to," Marshall said, voice devoid of sympathy. "We have enough. Enough. Enough to destroy his life." Peterson's breathing became shallow. The room tilted. "You're making a mistake," he whispered. But neither detective flinched. Because in their eyes, Peterson Hollywood was already guilty. Across town, Hannah Hollywood sat in a sterile CPS office, her hands shaking as she clutched a penalty notice with trembling fingers. A caseworker, Linda Palmer, sat across from her, speaking in a calm but merciless tone. "The state's priority is to ensure Lily's safety," she said. "Given the allegations against your husband, you have 2 choices." Hannah could barely breathe. "What choices?" Linda folded her hands neatly on the desk. "Either Peterson leaves the home immediately, or Lily will be placed into foster care." Hannah's vision blurred. "You can't. She's never been away from us. She needs her father. He's innocent." Linda's face remained neutral. "We're not here to argue that. We're here to protect the child." "She is protected," Hannah cried. "She loves her father. She's never been afraid of him." Linda didn't blink. "Then make your decision." The words felt like a knife to the heart. Hannah wanted to scream, wanted to fight, to demand proof, to call every lawyer in the world. But then she looked at the child services agent standing by the door. The woman had a clipboard in her hand, ready, waiting to take Lily away. And in that moment, Hannah knew. If she fought back, they would take her baby. Her hands clenched into fists, nails digging into her skin. Tears blurred her vision. She had no choice. Her voice trembled. "I'll tell him to leave." Peterson barely had time to process his own arrest before he was released on bail and forced to pack his bags. He moved like a ghost through the house, stuffing clothes into a suitcase, grabbing his badge, his gun, his whole life in fragments. Lily was asleep, too young to understand what was happening. Hannah stood in the doorway, eyes swollen from crying. Peterson turned to her, searching her face. "Do you believe me?" Her lip trembled. "Of course I do. But you're still making me leave." Hannah let out a broken sob. "If I don't, they'll take Lily." Peterson closed his eyes. His whole body shook. For 10 years, he had protected this town. Now, the system he swore to uphold was tearing his family apart. He exhaled sharply, blinking away tears. Then he grabbed his suitcase, walked past his wife, and stepped out the front door. The air outside felt wrong, too cold, too silent. As he reached his car, he caught sight of Victoria watching from the upstairs window. And that's when he saw it. A smirk. She had won. Peterson drove into the night, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He had no home, no job, no access to his daughter. By morning, he would be officially barred from seeing Lily until the case was resolved, which could take months, years. He pulled into a cheap motel parking lot, his hands trembling as he shut off the engine. Then, for the first time since this nightmare began, he broke. His body shook with sobs, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Lily's laughter echoed in his head, her tiny arms around his neck, her love, her trust. And now she would be told her father was a monster, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Each morning, he woke up in the dimly lit motel room, the cheap air conditioning humming endlessly in the background. His body ached from restless sleep, and his mind raced with the same unanswerable questions. How could this be happening? How do you prove that you didn't do something? He refused to let despair consume him. His daughter was out there, and he would not let them steal her from him. With nowhere else to turn, Peterson decided to fight back. His first move was to take a polygraph test. He sat in a small, windowless room, wires strapped to his arms and chest as the examiner, a neutral-faced woman in a gray suit, asked him direct questions. Did you ever touch your daughter inappropriately? No. Did you ever harm your daughter in any way? No. The machine recorded everything, his breathing, his heartbeat, every minuscule reaction. At the end of the test, the examiner looked at him, her face unreadable. You passed, 100%. Peterson exhaled, gripping the arms of his chair. Finally, proof. The test results were sent to the authorities, but CPS didn't care. They dismissed it, waving it away like an inconvenience. Then things got worse. His caseworker, Monica Reeves, filed a new report claiming that Peterson was mentally unstable. She claimed that he was schizophrenic, which, according to her, meant he could manipulate polygraph results. Peterson was stunned. Schizophrenic. He had never been diagnosed with any mental illness in his life. It was a lie. A desperate, fabricated lie to justify keeping him away from his daughter. But fate had other plans. A new caseworker was assigned to the case, a woman named Elena Brooks. Unlike Reeves, she wasn't jaded. She wasn't looking to protect the system. She was looking for the truth. Elena began reviewing the files, and it didn't take long before she saw the cracks. She decided to go straight to the source, the original police investigator who had worked the case. When she showed him the report about Peterson's alleged schizophrenia, he froze. Schizophrenic. His brows knitted together in confusion. "Who told you that?" Elena shifted in her chair. "It's in the official report. It says you diagnosed him as mentally unstable." The investigator's face turned red with anger. "I never wrote that." He jabbed a finger at the file. "That's a complete lie." For the first time, someone in the system questioned what had been done to Peterson. Elena pushed further. She reviewed phone logs, case notes, witness statements, and that's when she found the biggest revelation of all. Victoria. She had called CPS before the doctor ever raised concerns, before Lily ever went to her appointment, before Peterson was arrested. She had started it all. Victoria had planted the idea in the system. She had manipulated everyone. CPS, the doctors, even Hannah. It was jealousy, resentment, spite. She wanted Peterson gone, and she almost won. Elena took her findings to the deputy director of CPS. The weight of the evidence was too much to ignore. On May 19, 2024, Peterson and Hannah were summoned to a private meeting. The deputy director, an older man with tired eyes, sat across from them, his hands folded on the desk. He took a long breath before he spoke. "In 30 years, we have never reversed a case without being forced to by the courts." His voice was firm but tinged with something that almost sounded like regret. "But we were wrong." Hannah gripped Peterson's hand, her nails digging into his skin. The deputy director looked Peterson straight in the eye. "Peterson, you can go home." For a moment, Peterson couldn't speak. He could barely breathe. Then, his entire body sagged with relief. The nightmare was over. He was going home to his daughter. The street in front of the Hollywood home was eerily familiar, yet it felt like an entirely different world. Peterson sat in his car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. His heart pounded against his ribs, each beat filled with anticipation, anxiety, and something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months: hope. For over 300 days, he had lived in exile, ripped away from his wife, his daughter, his home. He had dreamed about this moment every single night, but now that he was here, parked in front of the house he had once called safe, a new fear crept into his mind. Would Lily remember him? Would she be afraid? His fingers trembled as he reached for the door handle, but before he could step out, he heard the sound that made his chest tighten. The school bus. The yellow vehicle slowed to a stop, hissing as the doors creaked open. Then he saw her. Lily. Her small frame bounced slightly under the weight of her pink backpack. Her hair, slightly longer now, was tied into a loose ponytail, her shoes scuffing against the pavement as she took careful steps toward the house. She looked older somehow, stronger. But would she still see him the same way? Hannah knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. Her voice was soft, but Peterson could read her lips. "There's a surprise upstairs." Lily blinked, curiosity flickering across her face. She tilted her head, but didn't ask questions. Instead, she adjusted the straps on her backpack and climbed the steps, her tiny feet pattering against the wood. Peterson's breath hitched. He couldn't move. Then the front door swung open, and Lily stepped inside. His heartbeat thundered in his ears as he watched her climb the staircase, her small hands gripping the railing. Then she reached the top. She turned the corner, and then she saw him. Lily froze, her big innocent eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, time stood still. A sharp inhale escaped her lips, barely audible. Her little chest rose and fell as she processed what she was seeing. Then, in a voice so small, so fragile, yet filled with unmistakable recognition, she whispered, "Daddy?" Peterson tried to answer, but no words came out. His throat clenched, his body frozen in place. Then, Lily's face lit up. Pure, unfiltered joy spread across her features, and before he could even think, she ran. Her little legs moved as fast as they could, her arms outstretched, her backpack bouncing wildly behind her. Peterson caught her just in time. She slammed into his chest, and he lifted her off the ground, holding her as tightly as his arms would allow. Lily buried her face into his neck, her small arms squeezing him with all her strength. She was crying. He was too. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They just held on, their bodies shaking, their breaths uneven. Then, in a voice muffled against his shirt, she whispered, "I thought the bad people took you away." Peterson clenched his jaw, his eyes shutting tight as fresh tears spilled down his face. "They tried, sweetheart," he whispered, "but I came back." Lily pulled back just enough to look at him, her eyes glistening with tears. "You won't leave again?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Peterson cupped her small face in his hands, his voice steady, unbreakable. Never. For 307, almost a year, they had stolen his little girl from him. Now she was back where she belonged, and he would never let them take her away again. Enjoying this story? Do share, like, and subscribe. Let's continue. Peterson never returned to the police force. The badge that once meant protection, honor, justice, had failed him. Instead, he found a new mission. He became an advocate for wrongfully accused fathers, men who had been ripped from their families, men who were fighting against a system that didn't listen, didn't care. He told his story, and he fought to make sure no other father had to endure what he had. Victoria, she disappeared from their lives. Hannah never spoke her name again. She and Peterson made a vow. No one would ever come between them again. They homeschooled Lily, filling every day with love, laughter, and the time they had lost. They called it the stolen year. But in the end, love won. And the hug Peterson had begged for. It was just the beginning of getting his daughter back. If this story moved you, don't let it end here. Like, share, and subscribe to help spread awareness about wrongful accusations and the innocent lives they destroy. Your voice could be the one that makes a difference.